Hello Duelists, it's Townbox here, welcome to MST.TV. If this is your first time here, hit the subscribe button because, well, there's lots of fancy content coming up from this channel, and I'm sure you guys don't want to miss out. And there's lots of giveaways too. But okay, anyways, I know I haven't been doing card discussions in a while. I was doing MOS content and I was sick, so now I'm gonna do a triple card discussion for you guys and keep you guys up to date and some of my thoughts regarding these cards. Rather than just read the card description and let me know what you guys think, I'm actually going to give you a bit of more thorough rundown of how I believe these cards are going to transition Yu-Gi-Oh! And the cards I'm going to be talking about for the first two cards that aren't released yet, not even in OCG, would be the Circuit Break cards, Shut Line, which is the next big counter trap, and the next big trap card, Struggling Battle. Those were the two trap cards, and just to remind you guys, the Heavy Dust Storm is a card coming out. And maybe I'll talk about Recall as well. So anyways, let's go into the very first card. So the first card I want to talk about would be Shut Line. This is the counter trap that basically negates things in the same column as itself. So the card states that when a speller / trap, this is actually kind of interesting to me, I'll go back to this point in a bit, or monster effect is activated in the same column as this set card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So that's fair enough. It's a all well-rounded negation, kind of similar to Infinity Barrier and Stellar Nova Alpha. Yeah, fair comparison, except that it's much more limited in terms of its condition. The condition, you can't negate all parts of the field. You don't have all, well, 15 zones to negate. You can only negate within 3 to 4 zones if you include the Link Zone or the Extra Monster Zone. Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, either this card is very good or it's so-so, it's super easy to play around, or you just don't care. You fit in within one of those categories. But for those of the guys that think that this card is amazing, I can see your point. It is basically free. It's a free negation for everything, and it creates a bit of a landmine for your opponent to step on. They're playing Minesweeper on top of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And they can misplay simply just by putting the monster in the wrong spot. That's a new level of misplay that we are soon to expect in Yu-Gi-Oh! All over the place. If you don't expect this, you're not going to keep up, and you're actually going to become a low-tier player because you're not keeping up with the game's mechanics anymore. If you didn't keep up with pendulums, you're getting screwed over. If you didn't play Xyz at all, well, you would be dying in this format right now because Zodiac's all over the place. If you didn't keep up with Synchros, well, that was one era that you actually did not need to play. That was actually okay. But nowadays, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is super fast, and anyways, I'm deviating off topic. But now, about Shut Line, if you think about it as just one card, obviously it's not very good, but we're forgetting the fact that we're gonna have an extra monster zone, and that zone is gonna go nowhere. If you're gonna need to access your extra deck, you're gonna need that extra monster zone, and that creates a very big vulnerability for you. And think about it this way, the pendulum zones now have been tucked into the, well, leftmost spell and trap zone and the rightmost spell and trap zone. So if you actually put your cards there, your opponent is basically stuck always getting MST'd on that spot, and it does hurt. These cards do hurt a lot, and not only does this card, it will target a linear column, but Blasting Wire, check out my previous segment about potential cards that would come out. Well, that is also a card that's going to hurt you, so the whole rebuild of the field does in favor playing and keeping in mind of, well, all the positioning of all the cards that you are going to play. If that makes any sense. So some of you guys are still thinking, well, I can just play around it. If I see my opponent set a back row in one column, then all I have to do is not play in the same column as my opponent. You know, that is fair game. That is absolutely the right thing to do. You should never play in the same column as your opponent, and try to diversify how you split up your cards, and there you go. You've adapted to the new form of Yu-Gi-Oh! But is that really true? Because as long as we create more and more column cards, there are probably going to be more and more column cards released by Konami that will hinder your ability to play. You're kind of like playing a game of chess almost, where the positioning of your cards really matter. It could get to a point where, these are just my speculations on upcoming card effects from Konami, just to make the positioning a bit more interesting. Your Konami could make it so that a Link monster pointing to a specific zone, if it points to your opponent's zone, your opponent cannot use that main monster zone. There's a potential for that, or whatever the zone's pointing to, those monster effects are negated. There's potential for that too. And not only that, they can put it in the form of a continuous spell, a continuously activated continuous spell, and then everything within that same column has all their card effects negated, and it'll be probably a pretty busted spell because you can actually shut down everything. You play a normal deck, and that gives anti-meta decks something to play about, and you can also use the field spell Defense Zone from Code of the Duelist. If you guys don't know what the card does, basically if there's a monster in front of one of your spells and traps, your opponent cannot target that spell and trap, nor can they destroy it with card effects. So in other words, if you have they can't MST that card, and they can't Cosmic Cyclone that card either. It's a very good way to protect your counter traps. Yeah, there's lots of things about columns that make a lot of sense right now, and I can see a lot of potential column cards that start to hinder your opponent's movements. And just to name a few, say you can summon a monster, and that monster basically can Phoenix Wing Wind Blast one of your opponent's card in the same column. It's very much possible. Maybe they'll set limitations on how these cards work, but overall, card effects basically just got completely opened up thanks to Konami putting more R&D into their column mechanic. And yeah, so like Shut Line and Blasting Wire, if you have a ton of these on the field, and then you have another monster that basically has another column effect, you basically are controlling the entire board. But how do you actually play around that? Well, you can obviously burn off more cards, because the moment one card is used, the zone kind of frees up again. If something stepped on the landmine first, you baited the first landmine, now you can keep playing on top of that same zone that is actually safe. Now here's something that I believe that is going to happen regarding these column-based cards. The first thing is we're going to have a transitional period where we're going to have a ton of misplays, because right now the common habit is everyone plays from the center. They play from the center, and then like if you don't have the playing from the center habit, well, congratulations, you're at least one step ahead. But if most people do play from the center outwards, if you look at how you play right now, you're playing with the second, third, and fourth monster zone most of the time, and then for the rest of the time, well, who cares? Like, if you actually fill up all your zones, and that's a special case. But for now, most people do play from the center, and that's going to be a habit where people can abuse that crappy habit of yours. They're going to set their Shut Line, their Blasting Wire in the center, and they're going to get the most out of it. Now, we're going to enter a transitional period, the second phase, which is we're going to start alternating our zones. We're going to be like, summon a monster here, set a card here, summon a monster here, set a card here. So we're not as vulnerable to as many cards as, well, depending if you're going to play Defense Zone or not. We're not going to be as vulnerable, but we're going to go into that phase for a bit. Maybe we'll actually start summoning from the leftmost and keeping the link zones open to open more link and basically link up more zones so that you can actually summon more extra deck monsters. Then we'll get to the final phase, which is everyone has already adapted to the column and link mechanic, and then people are actually able to play mind games against their opponent using these column-based cards. And when they're able to play mind games, we're going to see some pro plays where, oh my god, that guy actually got played into a corner, where if he actually summons a card here, that card gets negated, and it just becomes a bit of a crisscrossy grid of endless possibility. But let me know what you guys think about the column-based mechanic coming back strong in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are you looking forward to it, or do you just hate this thing? Man, why can't I just play the way I want to play? Let me know down in the comment section below, and we're going to talk about the next card. And the next card we're going to be talking about is one that I actually find super interesting. It is Struggling Battle. This trap card is coming out in Circuit Break, and there's 4 scenarios I want to talk about. But first, let's go into the card text. At the end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls more cards than you do, so that's the activation condition, timing, make your opponent banish cards they control face down so that they control the same number of cards as you. If you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. Okay, couple things to point out. First thing, it is at the end of the battle phase. In terms of its current translation, it says the battle phase, so I'm guessing this includes your own battle phase. Yeah, so that's one point to note, and it's an activation condition, and they banish cards face down, their choice. Second thing to note is, if you do activate this card will be on the field. It will be considered a card you control, so you don't wipe your opponent down to 0 cards if you activate this card from your hand. That's not how it works. They will have 1 card left. This card is not a complete board wipe, but it can wipe down the board down to 1 card left. Okay, now those 2 things are out of the way. 4 scenarios. First scenario, your opponent has Struggling Battle in their hand, but they decide not to commit anything on the field. This is reminiscent of the old Gores during Teledad phase. Your opponent has Teledad, and well, there's a Gores in their hand. They pass turn, and then you try to do any kind of swing with a Stardust Dragon, and they drop a Gores on you. Is this the same case? Yes, it's very similar because they're going to be taking advantage of the game thanks to you committing cards onto the field. And if your opponent does not play anything, what do you do? So one of my suggested things would be summon 1 card and attack. Since Struggling Battle can't really just send and banish 1 card, since you will control the Struggling Battle trap card during the resolution. Yeah, so it will always at least leave 1 card. So you can actually poke at your opponent with this. Here's the thing though, there's a follow-up for your opponent as well. I'll get to that in a bit. The second scenario, your opponent plays a bunch of monsters and holds it in their hand. And they expect that all their monsters are going to die. So this is more of a board wipe situation. You decide to play a Raigeki or a Dark Hole to wipe the entire board. And then now you're like, oh, I'm gonna go swing into my opponent. My opponent not likely to have anything. Well, your opponent can mind game you with this card, and all of a sudden you realize that most of your cards are, well, sent and banished. Thanks to this card, because you decided to, well, you've wiped his board down, decided to put in some damage, but you did not kill your opponent, and therefore at the end of the battle phase they activate this card from hand. You still basically lose out well, most of the cards that you've already committed. If you have 2 monsters, well, you're gonna lose at least 1 of them, and well, it's gonna be a bit of a struggle. But okay, the third scenario is your opponent sets a bunch of cards, including this card. That makes it a bit harder to read because, you know, under most common circumstances, no one's gonna actually get set everything unless they play field spells. And what you can do is, well, you can either play into the back row, or you can play Denko Seka. If you play Denko, then you can just completely shut them out because that, they're gonna die like a paleo player. Okay, so that's one of the scenarios, but it is much harder to read. Say you decide to play MST, you miss, and you decide to play Twin Twister, you still miss, and then all of a sudden you commit your cards, and then bam, you lose everything. But these are typical scenarios. But the fourth scenario is the one that I find most interesting. It is your opponent's turn. They immediately proceed to battle phase. They see that you have your Dryden, your Masterpiece, your Double Strike in the back. You've got Imperial Order. Wow, man, that's like the most ideal board possible at this moment. And all of a sudden, they go into battle phase. They go into battle phase. Okay, what's going on in battle phase? They're like, end battle phase. Do you have any response? Because by saying end battle phase, what you're really saying is, I'm passing priority to change the phase. It is now, well, you can respond. And what they're going to respond with is, I'm going to activate Struggling Battle from hand, using it like a Dark Hole for the front row and the back row, so that you're only left with 1 problem. Does that, based on the current card text, it seems like that is a possibility, because it does not state that this card can only be activated, well, at the end of your battle phase. It only states this at the end of the battle phase. Let's hope that if this is the wording, then this is a possible play that might even happen to us. And therefore we gain basically one of the best board wipes ever, because currently, in terms of unbreakable board state, this is one of those cards that can definitely break the entire board. And not only that, it's like right now, based on what we play, your main phase 1 trying to break the board and failing is a very common thing that we see all the time. But if you see someone just proceeding into battle phase and just basically giving up their battle phase just to clear the board, this is that card. This is that card that basically I am going to sacrifice my battle phase to basically wipe your board. And there's not exactly much you can do about it. But what you can do about it is start playing Trap Negation. If you start playing Trap Negation, you don't have to worry about this card too much. But that is something I would like to bring up, which is going to change the course of Yu-Gi-Oh! So how do you actually play around this card? Well, you can OTK your opponent. Don't commit back row until, well, you really need to commit back row, and try not to commit everything, and use Trap Negation. That's my suggestion for this Struggling Battle card. What are your thoughts about Struggling Battle? Did I miss anything? Did I misread anything? Leave it down in the comment section below, and we're going to proceed to the next 2 cards. Just a reminder that these are cards that do exist in Code of the Duelist. So in Code of the Duelist, which is the next set coming out, this is going to be the link format, but we are going to get our next spell trap removal, which will most likely see play when you go first. Heavy Dust Storms. Target up to 2 spells and traps on the field. Destroy them. You cannot conduct your battle phase. The turn you activate this card. But you're not limited to 1 copy. So this is the... well, the free Twin Twister, if you will. This is the one where you just set in the back row and bam, your opponent loses cards and you don't have to commit to Twin Twisties. It is a bit slower than Twin Twister, and it does suck if you do get anti-spell fragments. The Twin Twister can at least, you know, get rid of it because it is a quick play spell. But, you know, being this card base nature as a trap, it is much slower, and I only recommend playing this card when you go first. But aside from that, say goodbye to a lot of anti-meta cards. But thanks to a lot of the new link-based cards, you can actually prevent the targeting thanks to cards like Defense Zone. And perhaps if you do have a card set in the same spot as your opponent, what was it, Shut Line or anything that can negate traps, that is obviously going to be very helpful to stopping this card. The next card I kind of want to talk about, I'm not sure if you guys even know that this card exists. It's Recall. Recall is basically Dark Bribe for monster effects. If your opponent activates a monster effect, you can, well, let them draw a card and then negate the activation of that card and then destroy that card. It is literally Dark Bribe for monster effects. It even has the stupid goblin, well, getting his pot of desires taken away. Yeah, this card, what do you guys think about this card? Because is it actually worth giving your opponent that 1 card to negate their monster effect? If you're killing a Trident, hell yeah, that is absolutely worth it. Can you kill a Masterpiece? Yes, you can kill a Masterpiece. Let them draw that 1 card. Maybe they can't come back. Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, even though if your opponent does gain like card advantage against you, you can count the number of plays your opponent can make. Let's be honest, you can count it. For a Zodiac deck, I'm just going to use Zodiacs as an example. You count their normal summon, because that's one of the ways to actually put a Zodiac on board. You count the number of Tridents that they can put onto the field. You count the number of special summons they're able to play. If they manage to play through all of that, giving that a 1 card, worst case scenario, you give them a hand trap that they can use against you on your turn. That's the worst case scenario. But that's only after you counted off all of the cards. Because right now, currently how I play is, if I have a Trident on the field, and I have a Masterpiece on the field, and I also have a D-Barrier, D-Barrier basically counts that I can shut off all the extra deck monsters. Okay, so that basically means there's not going to be a lot of follow-up play if they do normal or special summon. It doesn't really matter, I don't care. But if they can drop Masterpiece, then I need to find some way to actually stop that. So my main priority would be shutting off the Dragonic Diagrams. It would be similar to that. So you just basically count the number of cards you can use to counter your opponent from them setting up a play versus how many cards you can set up. So even if you do give your opponent an extra draw, if it's at the end after they've already burned off most of the plays that they can make, doesn't really matter that much. Anyways, let me know what your thoughts are, and that will be my card discussion for now. I know it's been a really long card discussion, but I hope that you guys are really engaging in there and, you know, show me something that I would really like to know. Share me your knowledge, share with everyone. This is a community. Don't forget to join Facebook, you know, join the Discord, have a chat with everyone. And if you guys enjoyed this video, hit me up with a thumbs up. If you guys want to see more card discussion, definitely, well, tell me down in the message. I'd like to read your comments. If you guys want to see old videos, you can check it out with there and there. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to see more content from MST.TV. I'm trying to work on an animation. I have this whole storyboard thing going on. And yeah, these are basically what my scripts look like. I just doodle on the page. And that will be all. Enjoy your day, and don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.